The man you see in the upper left-hand corner is Phil Robertson from Duck Dynasty. Phil Robertson is the patriarch of the family featured in the show. They are a bunch of yuppies larping as southern good old boys, complete with ZZ-top beards, plenty of camouflage, duck hunting, and, of course, a love of Jesus. Now, Phil Robertson claims that he used to be an atheist. Personally, I don't buy it. But hey, let's see what he has to say about his life as an atheist.
I think what I was, looking back at it now, I believe that after I come out of college, I believe I was an atheist.
You believe. So you don't know for sure if you were an atheist. You just think, well, maybe I was. Atheism has a pretty simple definition. You either believe in a god or you don't. It's pretty simple. How can you not know? That seems pretty obvious.
I believe if you had to have a word for me, I know one thing. I was a sinful, low-down, sorry guy.
Of course, because all atheists are, naturally.
But you say, did you consider yourself an atheist or an agnostic? I was somewhere in there.
Okay, so he says he's somewhere in there. Let's hope he has more explaining of this story, because I'd really like to know what he means by that.
I've discussed this with you folks for a lot of episodes. And what it says is the wrath of God, Romans 1:18. Right after he said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, the story of Jesus coming down in flesh, dying on a cross, being buried and raised from the dead, because the gospel is the power of salvation, power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes.
I'm not sure what this has to do with anything. I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at, but let's let him have his moment.
First for the Jew, then for the Gentile. There's a mighty throng out there who do not believe that.
Why is it going to Muslims? This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, isn't it? The Dome of the Rock. What Muslims believe in God, and Jesus too, just a different version of it than Christians do. So what is he, what?
So the gospel comes along, Jesus comes along, historically, rock solid. You get in the gospel, a righteousness from God is revealed, how to be right, justified, forgiven.
And yet, it definitely seems like most of these sorts of people don't learn very much from it. It's always striking how the religion of Christianity seems to have very little in common with the words of Christ, but I digress. Let's again let him have his moment.
A righteousness that is by faith. We're believing in a God we've never seen, but we've seen and we are seeing the creation. Well,
Well, there's not much to it, buddy. I mean, this creation of yours is a real mess. There's terrible things that you probably haven't heard of, and some terrible things you have heard of. Here's a terrible thing you have heard of: childhood leukemia. Some creation. Here's a terrible thing you may not have heard of: tarantula hawk wasps. They literally find tarantulas, sting them, paralyze them, lay eggs inside of them, and then their babies eat their way out of the still alive tarantula, which is no doubt not very fun for the tarantula, but that is how it works. And as far as creations go, you just gotta ask, why? That makes perfect sense if things evolved, but it doesn't make much sense if a loving God created everything, because why would you create that?
said in all of my books, once I came to Jesus as a former unbeliever, I guess I was an atheist.
I think unbeliever is probably an overall better word for people like Phil Robertson, who really aren't convinced that there is no God, or don't really think that there is no God, but maybe just like decided at one point in life to focus on other things, maybe just having fun, maybe just building a business or a family, and eventually found their way back to faith, which they never really got that far from in the first place.
But I run up on the story of Jesus and I look around, and a lot of it in my mind, it started with where in the world did the cosmos come from, the universe?
The Big Bang.
Basically what I had been saying and believing is what my college professors had said.
Well, that's a good start, but you should always question, I think, everything. And see, I don't think it's a good thing to just accept everything everybody says. You should look at things yourself, and I can always appreciate that somebody decides to think outside of the box and question what they were told. That's always good. However, did you really have to go the exact opposite way on this one? Or, it's a little bit extreme of a shift, don't you think? But I also question this narrative. I mean, these people push this narrative for a reason. They want to say, well, the colleges, the universities are brainwashing your children to not believe in God anymore. But no, that's not what they're doing. They teach critical reasoning, critical thinking. They teach skepticism. They teach you to think about things more deeply than you have been before. They teach you to get outside of the box that you've been in all of your life. And of course, some people, not all, are going to come out of that process as atheists or non-Christians or of even another religion entirely. So I think there is some narrative pushing to be noted here. They are pushing a very specific narrative with this video. I believe that watermark in the lower right is from The Blaze, which is Glenn Beck's news network. Glenn Beck used to be a libertarian, but then he became something of a Trump guy, so now he's kind of like a Christian nationalist. So they always have some kind of agenda like this. You have to watch out for it, though. It can slip through your fingers if you're not watching.
They never brought up God. The creation story was never told.
Correct, because that's not scientific, although if he is saying that there aren't classes related to religion in college, he is wrong. There are classes you can take in, I would say, most colleges about religion. I know I went to a secular liberal university, and they did offer courses on religions, comparative religions, and that sort of thing. But I mean, I took one, and we did end up reading a good portion of the Bible in that course. So you can't really say, like, well, they didn't teach us about that stuff. Well, the scientists didn't teach you about that stuff. If you went to a philosophy class, they teach all kinds of things about what could reality be, where could it have come from, all kinds of thoughts. They just want you to think. He's making it seem like, well, they just told me that evolution was real and the Big Bang was real, and they didn't even put creation science in there. And that's correct, because creation science is not real. The Big Bang and evolution are real. However, I must note, in fairness, for all of my Christian friends out there, that you can realize that the Big Bang happened and evolution happened and still be a Christian. The existence of those things in the real world does not make your religion inherently invalid. You just have to change how you think, just a little bit.
When I was in college, but there was a whole lot about the universe got here. The Big Bang theory is what they were saying then. Now
Correct.
they've kind of modified that a little bit.
That's how science works. Science takes in new data and modifies existing theories to fit that data, or if those theories cannot be modified to fit that data and the data is compelling enough, those theories will be thrown out. That's how it works. However, I must note, the Big Bang, its case has only gotten stronger with time. Yes, we have modified various things about it because, again, that's how science works. It's a modification process. As you learn, you modify things. Science works that way. That's the good thing about it. You don't just have an unchanging doctrine of, let's say, the first person who invented the idea of the Big Bang. What was his name? I'm not good at like French, so I'll just say it in like the most American way possible. Georges Lemaitre. There we go. The most American way to ever say that. The person who invented the Big Bang, the actual title was, I think, Fred Hoyle. I think. Well, regardless, that's unimportant. What is important is that science is not just, okay, here's an idea. We've got this idea. From what we can see, it's correct, so we can never change it. No, that's what religion does, and that is a bad thing.
But basically they were saying there was nothing, and then kawoom, boom, and there's the cosmos.
Correct, and I do appreciate the way he decides to vocalize this, although I must note that there would have been no sound from the Big Bang, probably because there is no sound in space. But I do appreciate the effort here at entertaining the audience. Good job.
So nothing explodes and makes the cosmos.
Correct, basically. I mean, that's not the best way of explaining it. You might want to read some books on this subject if you're new to the idea, but I'll let it pass. That's basically correct. I don't see what the problem with that idea is, personally, but obviously these people have a huge problem with it.
If you just think about that, I mean, I was a C+ college student.
Well, that right there just tells you a large part of the problem, if you ask me. So maybe you should have tried a little bit harder, actually. Maybe you would understand a little bit better, but, I kind of don't want to like insult the man. I just want to say like he seemed to have listened a little bit, but not enough. And you know, he should learn about it. It's actually fascinating stuff. It's brilliant stuff. And I assure you, Phil, atheists don't just exist not thinking about these things. I think about this stuff all the time. I actually have a friend, my best friend. She's great. I was saying to her one day that it is very curious that the universe exists at all. You kind of got to wonder, like, well, why does it exist at all? Regardless of the God question, whether there's a God or not, it's still peculiar that anything exists instead of nothing. And she had a very interesting answer that sort of changed the way that I think about the subject. She is also an atheist, but her answer was basically this. She thinks that there is something instead of nothing because it's impossible for there to be nothing. And is that true? Well, maybe not. Maybe that's not how it works. But I do think that that idea is good enough to be a valid take, that things exist because it's impossible for there to be nothing. And that's just one explanation you can think of, just being philosophical on your own terms. You don't have to think that, obviously, since it makes sense to me, so I kind of think, well, that's a good explanation, that may be correct. I'm not a scientist, I don't know, it sounds good though. And philosophers have said the same thing. I mean, there are some scientific ideas along those lines. It's good to be able to think about these things and make your own decisions. And ultimately, if you think about these things and decide on religion, that's up to you. That's fine. I'm fine with that. But to act like it's such a mystery that the only option is either just A or B is really odd and binaristic thinking. It's not just either there was a Big Bang where the universe sprang forth from nothing for no reason, or the Christian God made it all. No, there are a ton of options between those two options, and not just between, but outside of those two options. There are more than you can count. And it's good to think about them, and read about them, and talk about them with other people who think very differently than you do. I learned a lot just from talking to my friend about it that one time. Imagine what other people could teach me about it.
Maybe low B. I tried not to study no more than I had to.
I'm trying really hard here to not say what I want to say, but Phil Robertson, I gotta say, and I'm being genuine here, you seem like a guy capable of being pretty smart. You've proven yourself at least 1 out of 3 times in that other video. So I just want to say, you sell yourself short, you could do better. Please try to do better if you should ever see this video for some reason.
But I'm rocking along until I was 28. And I certainly had never put my faith in Jesus Christ, that's for sure. But I heard the story about...
He looks like he put his faith in ZZ Top. And I do make that reference maybe a little bit too much, but I just want to emphasize, like, there are pictures of this guy and his family out there without these beards and without the camo, dressed as typical yuppies. This is a stage image they adopt for their little TV show, and now probably it's their main look. They probably don't dress like yuppies so much anymore, but who honestly knows? And there's, like, nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you're going to have a stage presence, that's fine. It can become your real thing. Obviously, I mean, look at me. I started dressing like a metalhead in my teens as like an image. Get transitioned to like a punk version of that in my 20s, and now here I am in my 30s as basically like a weird crossover punk metal goth sort of thing. So yeah, these things can happen. Like, it can go from being just like an image for stage or artistry or whatever and then transition. Nothing wrong with it. But it is kind of amusing that they go in that direction because, let me tell you, they are still yuppies.
him, and I stacked that up against what God has made, because as a man of the forest...
Was he holding an AR-15 just now? I hope I just saw that wrong. It's like a hunting rifle, but it really looked like an AR-15. Is he about to tell a war story? I don't even know. Did he go to war?
That was me in my college years, and to this day. I'm a man of the forest. I stay in the woods on the water all the time. Spent more time in the woods than I have anywhere else.
Well, we have that in common.
Romans 1:18, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness, and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness.
Okay, I do not know what he's arguing here. I don't know what the context is. I don't know what he's getting at. It just seems like more generic atheists bad kind of stuff. But really, do you think he would even believe that, honestly? Like, Christians will quote this stuff up and down. But in my experience, when Christians know you're an atheist and they know you're not like a bad person, they don't really seem to believe this stuff at all. What is the point, is what I'm getting at. I think he does know atheists because, I mean, he seems kind of familiar with the idea of atheism. I think he does know some. So does he really even believe what he's saying right now?
I mean, we have to come to some point where we say, what is the truth about everything?
The Big Bang happened, galaxies formed, stars kept exploding. Eventually, our solar system formed from a collapsing gas and dust cloud. And then, some billions of years later, life emerged and evolved into humans. That's the story.
We're looking around and we're seeing what are trees, the animal world, bugs, bacteria, viruses.
Okay, this is all kind of odd. This little ramble he's on here, I gotta admit I find it kind of humorous for some reason.
Flying creatures, huge, monstrous looking hippopotamuses, elephants, all the way down to tiny little bugs. I mean, the whole thing is just life. So Romans 1 was written, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them.
I just wonder, like, is he doing this Bible stuff? Is he picking out these verses not because of their relevance to his case, but because the audience likes it? That's what I wonder. It's like the praying thing. They prayed a whole lot on Duck Dynasty, and I just wonder, like, is it just an audience thing, or are they really like this? Well, I guess we're not going to... I think I know where he's going with this one, though. This one is actually about to be relevant. If you've never read this passage, well, listen up.
Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, they're talking about the atomic structure of things.
No, they're not. They didn't know about that when that was written. That is not correct. I guess maybe if it was written late enough, they could have known about that. But no, that's not what is being talked about at all. What are you doing, Phil Robertson?
The molecular makeup, the atoms. The Bible says there's a God. That's who he is.
I thought where he was going with that actually was going to be something like saying there's some Bible verses that suggest that God has implanted it in every human soul to know that he exists, and therefore there can be no atheists. But if he's claiming to be an atheist, I guess it should be obvious why he wouldn't quote that one. But, you know, I mean, this is very similar. So I also understand why he's quoting it. It's just kind of silly, especially how deeply he reads into it. I noticed like Muslims do this a lot too. I've argued with some Muslims online because I'll argue with just about anybody over just about anything. And Muslims like to claim special knowledge, like that they'll say that the Quran knew all of these things well before scientists ever knew them. And if that's the case, well, why didn't Muslim scientists discover them first? Like, think about it like this. The Islamic Golden Age was a time of science and reason, and it was just the torch carrier from the Roman sort of and Greek civilizations to the medieval European civilizations. They literally took the torch and ran with it. There was incredible scientific progress made over the course of the Islamic Golden Age. And you'd think that if these things were really true, that if the Quran did have all this secret knowledge about the nature of the universe that only scientists have now discovered, you'd think they could have discovered it back then. Likewise, Hindus also do this stuff. There's a lot of Hindus who will talk about how there's ancient science in the Vedas. Is that how you say that? And they'll say like, well, there's science we still don't understand in there. And it's like, well, no, there isn't. And all kinds of conspiracies arise from that too, like the idea that there were nuclear explosions in ancient India, that they must have been super hyper advanced, so they destroyed themselves with their advanced technology. And no, it's all the same like strain of nonsense. It just comes out differently in every religion. because people can read into stuff like this. If you're looking at any kind of holy book you think is divine and sent from God, you can read into it anything you want to do. And in this particular case, he's chosen to read atoms into it. Now, it's not like atoms, the idea of them was completely unheard of in biblical times. There were philosophers in Greece, for example, that did have ideas like that. I assume Egypt and stuff too. So it's not unforeseen that they could like have ideas like that. But I don't think that's what they were intending with those passages, making this argument very disingenuous at the very least. Disingenuous, I think, at the very least.
Everywhere at once, all-knowing. You're like all-powerful. Everywhere at once. What may be known about him is plain to the human race because God has made it plain to them. If you just look.
Well, no, actually, that's not true. In fact, I think if I were God and I wanted people to know that I existed, I would have made it a whole lot more obvious than this. Let me just give one example of something I could have done to make it more obvious. So, in the last episode I covered of his, he spoke about how the Earth is about an average distance away from the sun of 93 million miles. Now, that's an average. The orbit is somewhat elliptical. I think that's the right word for that. So it's not like a perfect circle. So it's 93 million on average, but it varies by tens of millions of kilometers over the course of the year. Now, if I were God and I wanted people to know that I exist, I would have made something really peculiar about that. I would have made it an exact number. I would have made it like 100 million on the dot, like 100 million miles away from the sun, on the dot, and every other planet in their like current positions. Stuff like that. That's what I would do if I were God and wanted people to know by my design that I am out there. Something like that. Now, there's plenty of other examples you could think of, but that seems like an easy one, doesn't it? Because, no, that's not going to tell, like, right away that there is a God out there. But that is just such an astounding thing that it would be hard to imagine that's a coincidence. And I know this is like something they'll use on atheists. They'll say, well, can all of this really be a coincidence? And it's like, well, yeah, actually it can. But if there were a number that specific, 100 million on the dot, not even an inch difference one way or the other from the center of the orbit, that would be pretty compelling. I think that would be very hard to overlook. But we don't see that kind of thing. We do see very precise numbers. But very precise numbers with just an infinite number of smaller digits after the decimal point. So, no, I don't think it's very apparent that if God exists, he wants us to know about it. In fact, it seems like he tries to hide himself. There is this concept of the divine hiddenness, the hiddenness of God, that God hides himself from us deliberately. And again, if I were God, I don't think I would do that. Now, considering the events of Genesis, maybe he has his reasons, like the whole don't eat of the fruit of the tree, you know, of good knowledge of good and evil. But I would also say if I were God, I wouldn't have put that tree there, especially because I knew the future and I knew what they were going to do with it already. And they didn't really have a choice if I knew about it. So anyway, I just wanted to cover this clip because I find this man kind of fascinating. Honestly, I find him kind of charming in a way. He seems to me not very sincere. He seems pretty apparently fake. And that's whatever. He's a performer. That's what performers do. I'm sure he's probably a fine person despite being a rich yuppie. He's kind of charming, kind of funny sometimes, not intentionally, I imagine. At times, oddly knowledgeable, actually. So just a fascinating figure with some very odd opinions and just very odd things about him. I must also note that when I was looking up this video, I found out that the title of the first video, to which this one is a sequel, is very similar to another video. It turns out Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk also did a video called Phil Robertson versus Atheism. Mine is obviously Duck Dynasty versus Atheism. I am sorry, Kyle Kulinski. I did not do this on purpose. However, I'm going to run with the title. If you stuck around all the way through this video, you have the patience of a saint, and I appreciate you for it. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you have something to say, positive or negative, please leave a comment, and I will probably respond to it. If you like what I do and want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. It will help the channel grow, and I will get more recommended by the algorithms. And if you want me to cover something, please mention it. I'll try to cover it. I love finding new things, and frankly, I run out of ideas a lot. So please interact with me some. It would help a lot. And, have a great day or night or whatever.